So this is the buyer agency agreement, exclusive buyer agency agreement. One thing I did want to point out for those of you who are not familiar with it, there are guidelines for both these two forms, and they're in your zip form software. They're in your command documents as well. And each of those guidelines goes paragraph by paragraph and kind of explains best practices for each field. From my perspective, I'm here today. Actually, I own a real estate school, so I'm a real estate instructor with the Real Estate Commission, and I teach these classes, and we teach post and we teach pre. So I'm used to teaching these forms. That's not the purpose of today's class. I'm not really going to drill through each paragraph with these guidelines. I do encourage you for your homework as we go through this process, you actually fill out a buyer agency agreement, fill out a listing agreement, upload it through command, submit it to me for review so that you can be familiar with the process. But what I'm going to show you is more from a broker in charge perspective, not the real estate instructor perspective, but what I'm looking for to be in compliance with our office. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Cool. So one thing that I have seen missed a lot is this date right here. People are often skipping the date entered into the agreement. And I hate to have to do that, but sometimes I do have to, well, I do actually return the document because this date has been missed. So when you enter into a buyer agency agreement, while everybody signs and dates it, right, we need to know when does this agreement start. And so this date is actually the date that the agreement is going to start. So that's what we want to see there. This is the buyer's name. By the way, I do often as broker in charge get questioned about, it's 1 to buy, 2 to sell, right? Everybody's heard the 1 to buy, 2 to sell. Married couple wanting to buy a house, the wife is going to be the buyer. Does the husband need to be on all the buyer agency agreement and blah, blah, blah. He does not have to be, but I will tell you if buyer is one of the buyers is getting, and they're married, getting a loan, they might as well be on all the documents anyway because the spouse will have to sign the deed of trust. So I would hate for you to go through all of this with the husband or the wife and get to the end at the closing table where the lender is requiring them to sign the deed of trust and you didn't have them on board to begin with. So it's helpful, even though it is 1 to buy and you don't have to have them, just to engage them in the process so you have them and their contact information at the beginning. Not going to kick it back for that. That's just a little tip. Now this one, for the firm, it should be Keller Williams Realty Elite. Some of you may have firms, some of you may be on teams. The Real Estate Commission, we actually had some issues with this because like my team, the Carolina Crew Inc. is its own firm. So if I put the Carolina Crew Inc. / Keller Williams Realty Elite, while I'm identifying both firms, it creates agency issues. So we actually had a complaint where there was a team involved and it was written as such. It was the team name / Keller Williams Realty Elite. And it was a dual agency situation. So the buyer's agent and the listing agent were both at our firm. And the Real Estate Commission said, well, we don't know if it was dual agency because was it with the firm, the team firm, or was it with Keller Williams Realty Elite firm? Because they're two different firms. You could have actually not had dual agency with it being at 2 different firms. So I was like, that's a good point. And their advice is the firm that is receiving the money goes here. And since you are all working at Keller Williams Realty Elite, all the commission money goes to Keller Williams Realty Elite. Let's put Keller Williams Realty Elite there. You can identify your team in the last section where we put the agent's name. But for this purposes, I'm looking for Keller Williams Realty Elite to go there. Questions on that?
No.
Cool. Type of property, obviously we're looking mostly at residential. There is the option to do commercial as well. If you are provisional in any way, shape, or form or otherwise, and you're going to engage in commercial, just give me a heads up. As your broker in charge, I'm responsible for those activities as well. And having done commercial, I have some insight into them, and sometimes I need a little bit closer pulse on weird transactions. General location, this could be something as general as the Piedmont Triad. I don't want to see North Carolina here. General location is meant to be a little more specific, at least counties, area, MLS area. North Carolina is a little broad because then that could put you in conflict if they're perhaps buying a second home at the beach and signing a buyer agency there. It could be in conflict. So we want to have a buyer agency for our general location here. Also, it could be for a specific property. Once in a while, we run into those unique clients who I don't want an agent. I only want an agent if I can buy this house. I only want you to help me for this house. Well, cool. We can do a buyer agency agreement exclusive to 123 Main Street. And that way we're only bound to be your agent for that house. And that might give them some level of comfort. So once in a while you do run into that. The duration of agency is a big thing I'm looking for. A start and end date. That's, ultimately every contract has to have a start and end date. I would encourage you to give yourself enough time to get closed, because one of the things I see as I'm reviewing it is the end date has passed when I'm reviewing the closed file, which means at that point we've got an expired agency agreement. We need to renew it. There is a form for renewal of agency that you can use, or you can just strike through this and change the date. But I would just give yourself plenty of time if the buyer is willing. Questions so far?
No.
Okay. Chat window's empty. I'm not seeing anything. Am I going too fast? You guys still awake and alive and got a pulse?
Yes.
Awesome.
Yes.
All right. Cool. Just checking, make sure everybody's still with me. I love the sound of my own voice, so I can just talk to myself all day.
For the duration, I usually do either 6 months or a year, depending on that. Is that sufficient for you?
Absolutely. That's usually what I do. And honestly, when I was selling in the last recession, we did a minimum of 1 year for everything. Listing agreements, buyer agreements, yeah. Because we knew it was going to take a while most of the time. But 6 months is pretty adequate right now, I think. So either one of those, whichever the buyer is willing to agree to,
Okay.
totally okay. This is usually not A is usually not our option here, where we're choosing a retainer fee is what some people call it, or a flat fee. But if you choose to do that, you can. It would go there. Most of the time we're looking at B. Now this is where I get a little bit of a soapbox, anal retentive. I have stopped kicking these back because at the end of the day, people were doing what they wanted to do anyway. And if you don't get paid, that is your problem. But if you want to get paid, here is what I recommend. First of all, check the guidelines, but also notice that it says be very specific. And our real estate commission expects us to be specific here. So I usually, as a practice, put 3% of the gross sales price of a resale home, 2.5% for new construction, 5% for vacant land. So then I kind of have very specific what I expect to be paid on those types of transactions. Now it could change, it could be less, it could be more, but most of the time, a lot of my transactions will fall in that category. If it changes, I come back and change it. If it doesn't change, I'm all set. The things that you will see here that I don't love, and this is, your prerogative, but it will potentially compromise your ability to get a paycheck if it gets challenged by anyone, per MLS. Whatever buyer and seller agree to. You just got to be really careful with those because they're very ambiguous. And for example, if you put per MLS and now you sell a house that's not in MLS, guess what? You have no guarantee of getting paid. So that's why I said it's your paycheck on the line as to how specific you fill this out. The more specific, the better. Because when you've got a buyer client that says, hey, I'm not going to pay you, and you come to me as your broker in charge and say, Steven, this guy's being a real tool. I'm owed a lot of money, and my buyer agency agreement says per MLS, I'm going to say, sorry, I can't really help you because MLS is, or this house wasn't in MLS, so you actually just worked for free. Congratulations. So that's why I want to be able to help you, but I need it to be specific in order to enforce things should it come up. Questions on that?
No.
The only other comment I'll make on compensation is in the event you are selling, like for example, a new construction, and you're going to get an incentive, $1,000 bonus for selling. That also needs to be disclosed to the buyer prior to an offer. So we can put that here. There is another form for that called the additional compensation disclosure form that you can use. I don't care how, you can put it in an email. I don't really care how you disclose it so long as I have documentation that you told the client there is an additional bonus being paid out. Now, one of the things that people tend to miss there though is if I sell the second house and for ABC builders, then when I come back and sell a second house, they give me, a 4% commission instead of a 3% commission. Well, while I sold the first house at 3% and I did not get any bonus on that first house, I actually also have to disclose that if I come back, should I sell a second house, I have to disclose to the first buyer and the second buyer about that additional compensation because buyer one contributed to me receiving the additional compensation. So again, that can be an additional compensation disclosure agreement. That can be an email. That can be the flyer that the builders produce and you get their initials on it. There's a lot of ways to disclose it. It just does need to be disclosed in writing. Any questions on compensation? Everybody likes to talk about getting paid. No, y'all love it. Loves it. All right, cool.
I do have one quick question. Sorry. It says the you might have covered it. I might have missed it. The that first line for the compensation, the retainer's fee.
Yes.
Yeah. The non-refundable retainer fee. Yeah.
Yep.
Could you just briefly touch over that one more time? I probably missed it. My bad.
No, I kind of brushed over it because I haven't seen a lot of people use it, but you certainly can. And I would recommend sometimes, actually, we're talking about, there are buyers, believe it or not, that will run you ragged. And you know they're going to be a real challenge. Or maybe you're just, if you're going to work with this particular buyer, it needs to be worth your time. So you could, in fact, put in a flat fee of, let's just say, $500. I could put in a flat retainer fee that is obtained up front. So it'll be due right now. And I get it regardless whether you buy something. And then it can or shall not be credited to the commission on the purchase. So it's basically like an attorney. It's a retainer fee that you're going to pay me to get my services of showing you houses, do a consult, and help you on the front side. Okay. In this market, it's not. In this market, you could actually do a little bit more there because buyers may be looking for a higher level of representation. Some firms have that as if you're going to work with us, we're going to charge you a $75 administration fee just to sign on with us. As this is commission is always negotiable as a business practice. I have never actually used that, but I know some people that do, and it's a successful practice for them. So I'm not going to say yay or nay, but that's where it goes.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, just wanted to just know a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great, like I said, it's a way to get paid up front in some cases where you may not actually get to this percentage of commission because it may not close.
Okay, so more than likely, just going across like normal deals that you have encountered, this section right here for the retainer fee is blank.
Correct. Usually I will put an in there. Mm-hmm.
All right.
And even if you do get the retainer fee, just as a reminder, all commission comes to the firm. So you would have any of those checks made out to Keller Williams, and then would come back to you with your respective percentages. So that's page one, pretty much. Sometimes buyers will try to skirt this agreement, right? So they may try to, my buyer agreement expires in 3 weeks, and then I'll go back and buy this FSBO that you showed me without commission. Well, this is your protection period that you can put in however many days that you like that says, if buyer does go back and buy that house that I showed you while we were under buyer agency agreement, after our agreement expires, I would still be owed a commission. So you can put in 30, 60, 90, whatever you want to put there and whatever they're willing to agree. I'm usually a 30, 60, 90 day kind of guy. Usually 60 is about as much as I go. Because if they're willing to wait 60 days beyond that, then yeah, kudos to them. But that is a little extra protection period for you so they don't run out behind you. This obviously some of the verbiage here you guys can you can read the guidelines. It'll explain a lot of what it means, but essentially, I can show other buyers the same property. I'm not, if I have that hot property that everybody wants to see, I'm allowed to show it. Here are my duties as a broker and what my firm will do for you. Disclosure of your name and mailing address will be made to potential buyers as well. On the contract specifically is where we're looking to disclose this. So we're having a permission from the buyer to give their mailing address and their name, mostly on the offer, because if it's appropriate, the earnest money, for example, may have to be released to this clerk of court. And so if, in fact, there's an earnest money dispute and the clerk of court receives said money, we have to be able to legally notify the buyer. And so on the offer to purchase, we're going to put their mailing address so that the attorney can mail them an official notification that the earnest money has been released to clerk of court. But of course, in order to disclose any confidential information like someone's name and address, we have to have permission. So this is where they're giving us permission to do so. This is in pretty much all of your agreements, the capital, bold, non-discriminatory language that is required by the general statutes. Here's the buyer's duties to you. Basically, be honest, work with you exclusively, give you information you need to do your job, and kind of follow the proper protocols. I'm not going to spend a lot of time there. And this is the disclosure again that you are a real estate broker and only a real estate broker. As I tell every broker I've ever taught, we don't tell clients what to do. We give them information and advice so that they can tell us what to do. The moment you tell a client what to do and you're wrong, you're liable. So we gather information, much like a concierge. We can make recommendations, but then we want to give them good information to give us a directive. So we're following their directive. So when we do what they told us, they were wrong. So it helps mitigate liability. One of the common things I see is people not checking these boxes. And I don't know if it's because you're not giving it to them or if you just don't want to check the boxes, but you should make sure that a buyer gets a sample copy of an offer to purchase. They should also get question and answers on home inspections. And they should also acknowledge and get a sample of professional services disclosure. So on the onset, when I'm doing this buyer agency agreement, I give them all three of these as samples. They are in your, you actually have sample versions in your form software. You can just give a regular version, doesn't have to be sample. But these are three informational documents only at the moment. We're not using them, but hey, we're likely going to be going under contract soon. So let's get you one to look at. So when you're bored, you know what to expect. Let's get you a question and answers on home inspection. And so when you're asking me whether I need one, you'll be a little bit more educated. And a sample copy of pro services, because that's a document that lives throughout the transaction that is required by this firm. If you have been with other firms, it may not be required. This is not a real estate commission required document. Professional services is a required document with all buyers in our firm because it's a cover our and your but form. And so it's just really a checklist of the potential things a buyer could do, home inspections, things like that. And yes, they're selecting it or waiving it, and then we have the provider listed. And so that is a way for us to help document, because I get a lot of calls as the broker in charge of, my agent didn't tell me I need a home inspection. Well, yes, they did. Here's the pro services where you waived getting a home inspection and you initialed beside it. And so now you can't blame our broker. So that's just a cover your butt form. Some home warranties offer a rebate of, $50, $60, $75 marketing fee. I don't take those. I always pass them along to my clients for any kind of savings they can get. But if you are in fact going to market and your client does opt to get a home warranty and that home warranty company is going to give you that fee, this is where it has to be disclosed. Mostly because it's nominal. It's usually $50, $75, and it's a pain in my butt to keep up with and disclose. I usually just put 0 or NA there, but that's up to you. Just if you are going to receive it, make sure it's disclosed. Confidentiality of offers. This one's a big deal that folks are still tripping over, and we're seeing a lot of it in the CE. Any terms of an offer are confidential unless this buyer gives you permission to share it. That could be something as simple as the terms. I hear this a lot. Hey, we have 5 cash offers. Well, the fact that an offer is cash is a term of an offer that if you didn't have the buyer's permission to share, you shouldn't have. Their motivations, a lot of those things. So that's just saying a reiteration, mostly a reminder to brokers and clients that we will keep those things confidential. There is an additional provision section here if you want to put that there. The only time I ever use this is I actually write in a 24-hour easy exit plan. And this is just a marketing thing that I do that essentially says, if you don't like my services, give me 24 hours to fix your concern. And if I haven't, then you can fire me unconditionally. We'll terminate this agreement. You don't owe me a dime. That's just something I have as a marketing agreement. It's not anything required, but that's where I would put it. Otherwise, you probably are not going to use that additional provisions very often. Questions so far?
No.
Cool. Dual agency, if we're talking about dual agency, remember, if you are with Keller Williams Realty Elite and both buyer and seller are represented by Keller Williams Realty Elite, we are falling under dual agency. So hopefully you've had the work on real estate agents, a conversation and brochure done prior to the point in which we are doing this buyer agency agreement. But if you have not, this is just a reminder to the client about that dual agency situation. Now, this is where they're actually making a selection, and this is where I often have to return forms. Buyers have to initial at least one of these two, and possibly E. but they're either going to authorize the firm as a dual agent or they are not. Now, a couple of things. If they are authorizing us as a dual agent, that's cool. They can initial here and you're done. If they are authorizing as a dual agent but want designated agency, they would initial here. I'll come back to that. If I see this box initialed on a buyer agency, I'm going to send you a note that says, cool, just so you know, it's an exclusive representation. You cannot show this buyer any Keller Williams listings, because when you are showing them a listing, it becomes dual agency. So that's something just to be aware of, and to have the conversation with the buyer. Hey, we can initial here, but I cannot show you any listings with my firm. If you're okay with that, cool. They may be okay with that. You might be going to buy a new construction home that's going to be listed by a builder. This is appropriate, no problem. If in fact they may want to look at Keller Williams listings, you need to have them initial this line for sure. Now, sometimes that whole dual agency conversation gets them a little edgy and they get a little freaked out. And if you haven't heard my agency script on that, which some of you have not, it is, it's the whole sports analogy. If you may not have heard that, it's the buyers, historically, the sellers were the only ones who got a coach. The listing agent was their coach. Buyers were playing on a field in a game that they didn't have a coach. Well, in around 1993, we got buyer agency. So then buyers were able to get a coach as well. So now buyers have a coach, sellers have a coach. Well, once in a while, buyer and seller end up at the same firm, and that's where we get dual agency. Who's the only other person allowed on the field besides the coaches and the players in any kind of sports event? Anybody know? No?
I'm not going to answer because it's not fair.
I don't think anyone's going to answer, so I may have to give it away.
Yeah, you might have to. I can't think of that one.
So if the buyers are on the field, if we got one team on the field with their coach and one team on the field with their coach, who's the only other people on the field?
Referees.
Referee, right? So in a dual agency situation, a true this box only, I will be a dual agent. And like a referee, I can't coach you. I can't tell you what to do. I can only call a fair game, make sure the paperwork is right. I can tell the other party what you want me to tell them. If I learn something that that may help you, I can't share that. I'm a very neutral party, just like a referee. If I hear they're going to go deep, I can't tell the defense to back up. So that's what the dual agency situation looks like. That may be appropriate. This designated option essentially returns the ability to the agent to coach. So if I am designated to represent the buyer in this case, now I can coach you. If I know something about that seller that helps you, I'm obligated to tell you, just like exclusive agency. Excuse me. So this is meant to help me be your coach. Now, from a policy and procedure standpoint, as broker in charge, my job is to ensure that anyone who is marked as designated agent has been designated, which we can have if you're on a team, your team could designate, full broker could designate, I could designate. The intention of whomever is doing that designation is to make sure that you know nothing about the opposite party. If you know anything about the listing or the seller or their motivations or anything that would compromise their position, you cannot act as a designated agent at that point because you are obligated to share it. So that puts you back in that referee situation the moment you know that. So that's how the difference between dual and designated may operate. And we're working on hashing out specific policies on that designated dual agency so that it's a little more clear. But I just kind of wanted to have that conversation because it's easier to explain to consumers when you have that sports analogy. Was that helpful?
Yes.
Cool. Questions on the agency. They have to choose one. That is one of the key things I'm looking for, and probably the most important thing, and next to signatures, is did they make an agency selection? That is very important. If you are going to act as dual or designated in any capacity, this is the fee that you would expect to receive. So typically, whatever you put here is double what you put on the first compensation line because the firm is the one receiving the compensation, right? So if you're expecting 3% on a resale, the firm is probably getting 6% for dual agency, if that makes sense. Everybody clear with that?
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Obviously, signatures and initials. And your agent, by the way, as agent, you have to initial and sign. That's one thing I see people miss a lot. The ever-present wire fraud, make sure you guys go over that with them. every stage. Do not think that you've told them about wire fraud one time and that they got it. I have seen multiple cases of wire fraud, and oftentimes they were told about it many times, and it did not help. So always tell them early and tell them often about these wiring instructions. Do not email wire instructions. Have them call, pick up the phone, confirm with the attorney or wherever they're wiring that they have the accurate instructions. Try not to touch those if you can help it. And then the information. And one thing down here is just make sure you have your license number. You have to sign it, your real estate firm. This is where I said if you want to put your team name, you could, right? And then the firm license number. And actually in Command, you can save these as templates to help you with some of this data entry.